Imagine standing right at the base of Michelangelo's David.
Oh, wow. Yeah, just towering over you.
Right. You're looking up at, I don't know, 5 meters of this imposing, heavy, totally freezing Carrara marble. You can literally see the tension in the sculpted muscles.
It's just massive. The physical presence is undeniable.
It really is. But now I want you to imagine pulling your gaze away from that giant, looking down at your own hands, and realizing you're holding this raw cotton canvas that's barely 30 by 40 centimeters wide.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Right. Your mission is to somehow squeeze that 5-meter, three-dimensional mountain of stone into that tiny, flat little square. Welcome to today's deep dive, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, it's an immense translation problem. You aren't just trying to capture an outline, You're tasked with rendering the temperature, the gravity, and just that unbreakable density of stone on a surface that is, frankly, incredibly unforgiving.
That psychological pressure of staring at a blank canvas is just universal. But today, we're going to dissect this completely fascinating masterclass curriculum by Laura Palacios that, it completely demystifies this abyss.
It really does.
We're diving into the visual logic, the fundamental physics of light, and even like the chemistry of polymers to understand how you actually transform a flat cloth into an optical illusion of mass and volume.
Yeah, we're going to explore how an artist constructs reality, layer by layer, addressing the really specific problems of rendering light and shadow without falling into those super common traps that just ruin a painting before it even truly begins.
So let's start right at that paralyzing first moment. You have your 30 by 40 centimeter raw canvas, the emotion takes over, and I mean, my immediate instinct as a painter would be to grab a piece of vine charcoal or like a soft pencil and just immediately start blocking in the proportions of David's profile.
Right, you want to lock the inspiration down.
Exactly.
Which is unfortunately the fastest way to permanently compromise your workspace.
Yeah, really?
Well, because raw cotton canvas is tremendously porous. It's like a sponge. When you drag a piece of charcoal directly onto it, the pigment doesn't just, sit nicely on the surface. It sinks deep down into those woven fibers.
Oh, I see.
So if the angle of the jaw is off by even a millimeter, any attempt to erase it just forces that dark dust further into the weave. Your pristine workspace becomes this muddy mess, and you are instantly paralyzed by the fear of making an uncorrectable error.
That makes total sense. So to circumvent that paralysis, the maestra approaches the raw surface by basically fundamentally altering its chemistry.
Yes. Before a single sketch is made, she armors the canvas.
She mixes this really thick, kind of dull bluish base layer. It's titanium white, a touch of cobalt blue, and a little bit of yellow ochre. And she applies 2 really generous coats. But the fascinating part isn't the color, right? It's the application of extreme heat.
Exactly.
She actually uses a hairdryer on maximum heat directly on this wet layer. And I gotta say, initially, blasting thick, wet acrylic with high heat seems like a fast track to cracking or warping the surface.
Yeah, it seems totally counterintuitive until you look at the molecular behavior of high-quality acrylics.
Okay, break that down for us.
So we're dealing with colored pigment particles suspended in a liquid emulsion of basically plastic polymers and water. When you introduce the extreme direct heat of a hairdryer, you force rapid water evaporation.
Right.
But as the water leaves, those microscopic polymer molecules, they don't fracture, they cross-link.
Cross-link.
Yeah, they violently bond to one another, forming this continuous, flexible, and virtually impenetrable plastic shield across the surface.
So rather than shattering like dry earth, the polymers knit together into like a waterproof net.
Precisely. You have permanently seared the natural porosity of the cotton. It is no longer an absorbent surface. It is a sealed structural armor.
This perfectly mirrors the logic of a professional kitchen.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Yeah, imagine a chef preparing to cook a massive, super complex banquet for 100 people. If the kitchen floor is a porous, delicate surface like, I don't know, an unsealed hardwood, every dropped pan of oil or splash of wine is a permanent disaster.
Right, the chef cooks with total hesitation.
Exactly, constantly terrified of ruining the floor. But if you install a perfectly sealed, waterproof floor before the chaos begins, everything changes.
The psychological burden just vanishes.
Entirely.
Right.
Right in the middle of the dinner rush, if you drop a 5-gallon pot of bright red tomato sauce, you don't panic. You grab a wet rag, wipe it up in 3 seconds, and keep cooking.
Because the surface is protected.
Right. That drop sauce is a painting mistake. Because GRUPO RAIIM mandates this cross-linked polymer shield, a fresh mistake just cannot soak into the canvas. You just take a damp rag, wipe the wet acrylic away, and your original blue base remains completely untouched. You replace the fear of failure with, like, total psychological freedom.
You isolate the physical problem of the canvas so you can actually focus on the cognitive problem of the subject. And once the surface is bulletproof and the initial sketch is finally down, the painter faces the real abyss, which is the transition from a flat line drawing to three-dimensional volume.
Yeah, and when I look at the muscular volume of a marble statue, my brain registers this chaotic symphony of values. I see stark white highlights, deep black crevices, warm ambient reflections, and, cool shadows.
It's overwhelming.
It is. My instinct is to squeeze out half the tubes in my box, white, black, brown, gray, maybe some blue, and try to mix that exact super nuanced mid-tone right there on the palette.
And that instinct, it inevitably leads to cognitive overload.
How so?
Well, attempting to decipher the light source, the depth of the shadow, the ambient temperature of the room, and the local color of the material, all in a single mixture on a palette. It's just too much simultaneous data for the human brain.
So it just fails.
Yeah. The result on the canvas is almost always flat, muddy patches of color that totally lack any sense of internal depth.
So to eliminate that chaos, La Gran Artista utilizes a discipline of radical, almost Spartan limitation.
Yes, she does.
She clears the palette completely, no white, no black. She leaves exactly one single pigment, raw umber or tierra sombra natural.
By isolating just one dark brown pigment, she completely removes the distraction of color. It forces a masterclass in chiaroscuro, which is the mathematical relationship between light and shadow.
So you build the entire thing in brown.
Exactly. You build the entire structural volume of the David using only variations of that umber. However, achieving those subtle variations requires heavy dilution, which introduces a really critical rule regarding the structural integrity of the paint itself.
Right, because if you just flood that raw umber with tap water to make it transparent, you destroy those molecular bonds we just talked about.
Yes, the polymer skeleton just snaps.
The pigment loses its adhesion, and when the water evaporates, you're literally just left with dry brown dust that flakes right off the canvas.
Exactly. So you must use an acrylic glazer, a transparent medium. It is the exact same polymer emulsion as the paint, just without the pigment. Flooding the umber with the glazer stretches the color until it's as fluid as a watercolor, but it maintains 100% of its adhesive strength.
And the physical tools used to apply this stretched paint are just as rigorously controlled, right? The curriculum dictates the use of a number 8 synthetic angular brush.
Very specific.
Yeah, and I wondered about that, because if you use a traditional natural bristle brush like hog hair, it leaves deep parallel grooves in the wet paint. Those furrows are basically the literal footprint of the human hand.
And our objective here is to replicate the flawlessly smooth, continuous surface of polished classical marble. The viewer's brain simply cannot perceive an untouched stone surface if it is looking at the physical track marks of a stiff brush.
Right, it ruins the illusion.
Completely. Synthetic bristles, being microscopically fine and perfectly uniform, lay down a completely seamless transition. They enable a perfect sfumato, where the tones meld together so flawlessly that the retina just cannot detect the boundary between shadow and light.
But the brush alone doesn't achieve that sfumato.
No, it doesn't.
The most counterintuitive action in this entire methodology involves a dry rag. You mix the perfectly diluted umber, load up the synthetic brush, and then immediately before touching the canvas, you aggressively wipe the bristles on a dry rag. You intentionally remove almost all the paint you just picked up.
It forces a total paradigm shift in how we actually understand painting. We assume painting is the act of putting material on a surface like shouting pigment onto the canvas.
Right, more is more.
But professional mastery often requires taking material away.
You are whispering the paint onto the canvas. If you take a loaded brush straight to the surface, you dump material and you risk a harsh, totally uncorrectable edge. But by wiping the brush dry, leaving only this microscopic trace of pigment, you caress the volume into existence through dozens of impossibly thin, cautious layers.
You construct the architecture of the shadows gradually, ensuring every single transition is seamless.
Okay, so we have now whispered a perfectly proportioned three-dimensional David into existence. The sfumato is flawless, the muscles have deep structural volume, but because we relied exclusively on raw umber, the entire image just, well, it absorbs light,
It's dark.
Yeah, it's a brilliant mathematical map of shadows, but it desperately needs the blinding, glorious Florentine sun hitting the high points of the stone.
Right. The structure has weight, but it does not emit light. And introducing luminosity without destroying the delicate volume you just built is probably the most dangerous transition in the whole process.
The immediate temptation is to just grab a tube of pure titanium white and apply it directly to the nose, the shoulder, and the forehead.
Of course.
But slapping raw white paint onto the canvas acts like a solid plaster wall. It completely assassinates the nuanced brown shadows underneath.
This is exactly where Laura Palacios leverages the physics of the pigments through velours or glazing.
Okay, let's get into the physics here.
So, titanium dioxide is one of the most highly refractive and opaque substances available to us. Applied raw, its physical purpose is literally to be an impenetrable barrier. To turn that solid wall into a luminous veil, she creates a warm white mixing titanium with a microscopic fraction of yellow ochre to neutralize that sterile, kind of hospital fluorescent tone.
Right, you don't want him looking like a light bulb.
Exactly. And then she heavily floods it with the acrylic glazer.
By saturating it with the clear medium, she physically forces the microscopic particles of titanium dioxide to separate. It spreads them out until the opaque paste dissolves into this floating translucent mist.
It's beautiful.
It is. And this approach perfectly mirrors multi-track recording in a music studio.
So?
Well, if you try to record a drummer, a bass player, and a lead singer all in the same room on a single audio track, playing at maximum volume, you just get a wall of noise. The frequencies clash and create audio mud.
Right, you can't distinguish anything.
Exactly. That is what happens when you mix white, black, and brown simultaneously on your palette. But glazing is multi-track recording. First, you lay down a solid, deep bass track or underlying umber shadows. Then, on a completely separate, isolated track, you lay down the soaring vocal melody or heavily diluted translucent white glaze.
I see.
They occupy the same space on the canvas, playing simultaneously, but they never muddy each other.
Because the actual mixing of those colors never occurs on the wooden palette. It occurs through a phenomenon called optical mixing.
Optical mixing.
Yeah. When a viewer stands before the finished piece, ambient room light travels through the clear acrylic glaze, strikes those suspended particles of titanium white, continues down to hit the dark brown shadow layer, and then reflects back into the viewer's retina.
Wow, so the eye receives the deep shadow data and the brilliant light data at the exact same time.
Precisely. The visual cortex actually synthesizes those separate wavelengths, creating an internal three-dimensional glow that is physically impossible to achieve by just mixing brown and white paint together beforehand. You are literally making the viewer's brain do the heavy lifting.
That is a stunning manipulation of optics. You retain the full structural depth of the umber while achieving the brilliant refractive quality of the white.
It's incredible.
But, okay, we have the volume and we have the light. The form is beautifully rendered. Yet, if we are being ruthlessly observant here, the texture still reads as a perfectly smooth, 3D rendered plastic model.
And it lacks the soul of the material.
Exactly. Carrara marble isn't just visually smooth. It possesses this freezing, crystalline, totally unbreakable density. So how do you visually articulate the physical sensation of cold stone?
You introduce thermal contradictions. According to the methodology of GRUPO RAIIM, mere rendering becomes true artistry in the final stages by forcing extreme temperature conflicts into the midtones.
The maestro begins this final stage by mixing a highly diluted glaze of Payne's gray, which is a profoundly cold, stormy, icy blue-gray, and applying it to specific midtones, letting the warm umber base kind of peek through.
And then comes the contradiction. Directly adjacent to those icy strokes, sometimes mere millimeters away, she applies a wash of pure, highly diluted yellow ochre.
No white, just radiant, warm, golden light.
Exactly.
But placing starkly cold and vividly warm tones right next to each other seems like it would just create visual chaos, you know, confusing the lighting of the scene.
Well, you intentionally want to confuse the retina to replicate the material reality of the stone.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Think about it. A block of marble is composed of millions of microscopic calcite crystals packed tightly together. Because of their crystalline structure, they refract light totally unpredictably. One microscopic facet might tilt to catch the freezing blue reflection of the sky, while the crystal immediately next to it absorbs the warm, ambient golden light of the sun.
Oh, wow. So the stone itself is a chaotic surface of hot and cold light.
Exactly. By intentionally painting icy Payne's gray directly beside warm yellow ochre over the brown and white structure, La gran artista triggers optical vibration.
Optical vibration.
Yes, the retina is bombarded with simultaneous contradictory thermal data. The eye physically cannot settle on a single temperature. This microscopic visual conflict tricks the brain into perceiving the porosity, the crystalline fracture, and the ancient density of marble, rather than just a flat layer of acrylic paint.
You simulate the internal physics of the material by placing hot and cold light in direct conflict. It is a brilliant conclusion to an incredibly complex process.
It really brings it to life.
But looking back at this entire sequence, I mean, the heat-blasted blue armor, the whispered umber shatters, the multi-track white glazes, the thermal vibrations there is a hidden structural requirement that makes all of this possible.
Oh, absolutely. It demands an immense capacity for delayed gratification.
The waiting. You have to wait for the polymers to cross-link. You have to wait for the whispered shadows to cure. You have to wait between every single layer of the white glaze and between the Payne's gray and the yellow ochre.
Yeah, and if you lose your patience for even a minute, if you rush a glaze while the layer beneath is still even slightly damp, the multi-track recording bleeds together.
The optical vibration just fails.
Yep, and the illusion completely collapses into mud.
In a modern culture that just expects instant results and immediate visual gratification, this methodology kind of forces a rebellion. Patience ceases to be just a good habit, you know? It becomes a literal, tangible material.
I love that.
It is as structurally necessary to the painting as the titanium dioxide or the synthetic brush.
And the ultimate irony of this masterclass is that the breathtaking majesty of the final piece relies entirely on what the viewer will never actually see.
The invisible foundations.
Exactly. When you stand before the completed painting, you don't see the raw cotton. You don't see the thick blue heat-blasted armor. You cannot see the frantic early sketches or the errors that were quietly wiped away with a damp rag. Your eye cannot separate the dozens of whispered glazes into individual layers. You only perceive the effortless, glowing reality of three-dimensional marble.
But those hidden elements, the erased mistakes, the silent glazes, the structural patience, they haven't vanished. They rest in the depths of the canvas, secretly supporting the surface, working together to breathe life into the illusion. It really shifts how you view a painting in a museum.
It does. And honestly, it provides a profound lens for viewing the people around us, too.
Exactly. I mean, when you look at the complex, deeply layered people you interact with every single day, it's so easy to only judge the surface. But just like that canvas, every person is built on invisible layers. There are carefully erased mistakes, foundational armors built under extreme pressure, and silent, painful glazes of lived experience that were all incredibly necessary to build the complicated beauty you finally see resting on the surface.
The true volume of life is always built in the unseen layers.
Beautifully said. Keep whispering those layers. We'll see you in the next deep dive.